Excited to be here today, and I know we have a fun afternoon planned, and that is starting first with our keynote speaker, Tammy Sloan. So we're lucky to have her here. Like John said, we kind of called her on a whim, and she actually said yes. So we're super excited about that. But in that, I realized I didn't know much about Tammy Sloan, and so we were on the search to find out more about the elusive Tammy Sloan. So we asked her for some information, and she did provide us some. So we had to dig a little, and this is a little bit of what we found out about Tammy. Tammy Sloan is a retired businesswoman devoting 35 years in the hospitality business. A native of Ohio, Tammy relocated to Utah in the 80s to undertake new opportunities with Utah's exceptional way of life. Her tireless energy, positive attitude, and desire to help others succeed have advanced her career and led the sales team at Cisco Intermountain as vice president. So I know there's some people from Cisco here too, so thanks for supporting. Using key metrics to benchmark with best-in-class industry standards, Tammy and her team were the #1 distribution company for several years in a row. Tammy is definitely a game changer. She's dedicated to serving the community. People, businesses, and organizations have been greatly impacted by her generosity. She's a volunteer board member of the Utah-Idaho Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, as John mentioned, and she's been a tremendous support and advocate for local CF families and the foundation's mission to finally develop a cure for cystic fibrosis. In her current role as board member for the Ron McBride Foundation, Tammy is fundamental in providing opportunities for kids from underrepresented communities to help them succeed, learn, and have some fun as well. She loves Utah and Utah weather. She currently resides in Draper. We were just talking as she came in. She said she's gotten a lot of snow at her house and would love more and more snow. So she's always volunteering and advocating for people of Utah, but in her free time, she enjoys hiking, reading, socializing with her friends. She's very social. This is the first day I met her, and she just came up the stairs and greeted me so happily. So she's great. Proud mother to her son, Rhett, and as we all know, supportive wife and caretaker for her late husband, Jerry. So I'm excited to hear what she has to tell us today and learn a little bit more about her. So come on up, Tammy.
Thanks, Brandy. I'm Tammy Sloan, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I want to share my life story with you, and I'm going to start at a young age, so don't worry, I won't stick with that long. But I want to let you know, I am not a professional speaker, so don't judge me on that, okay? I just hope I give you a little bit of hope today, inspire you, or give you a few laughs. First of all, I was born in Ohio, and I was raised in a farming community in the same 968 square foot home that my mother recently lived in until she passed away. We were a family of 5 living in a 2-bedroom home. I was the middle kid. I know we were poor, but at the time I had no idea we were severely poor. And I thought everyone lived like we did. All the people around us seemed to live like we lived. I want to share a picture of my family. And I hope that they're going to put that up on the screen. It's kind of blurry, so hard to see, but this kind of gives you an idea of where I started. I'm the kid in the red pants. I don't know if you could see it. I have a wardrobe malfunction going on there. I don't know if there's a granny panties hanging out or what that is for sure. That's with a couple of my cousins and my grandma. My parents are in the back corner. Anyway, my parents both worked to make ends meet. They both had decent jobs. My mother worked in food service at the hospital, and my dad worked for the township. After my dad would get off work, he would hunt whatever was in season, and that's what we had for dinner. As soon as the bus dropped us off from school, I had to help clean whatever he killed that day. The extra would go into the freezer for another day. My favorite foods still include rabbit and fried squirrel. You don't find that a lot in Utah, but in Ohio, there's a lot of it if you're a good shot out in the country. We also had a lot of deer meat. And I know when I came here today, there were a couple deer out back and I felt bad about this, but that's something we had every winter. I did not like it. And during that season, when we'd have deer steak, jerky, hamburger, everything had deer meat in it. I became even skinnier at that time. And this summer, when it would rain, we would go frog gigging in ditches and ponds after dark. And you took a spear out and it was kind of fun. I don't know if any of you have ever done this, but you got these big frogs and then you brought them home, fried them up, and then you invited the neighbors over because it was quite a catch. In the fall and winter, we would trap muskrats. We didn't eat them, but we sold their hides. So to do this, to trap for muskrats, you go out into a cold pond at night. It's usually fall or winter, and I'd be afraid to do it now, but when I was little, I thought it was cool. You wear rubber boots and you feel down in the pond for the hole and you set the trap there for the muskrat. And then the next day you go back to get them. But anyway, when you bring your catch home, you had to skin them, stretch them out, and hang them up in the garage to dry. And we sold those to a local fur trader. If we saw a raccoon, this is kind of weird probably for you, but if we saw a raccoon by the road when we were driving down the road, we'd stop and pick it up if it was in good shape. And it paid $40 a hide. Back then, that was big money. And recently, when I was in Ohio, I checked to see how much it was paying. It's still paying exactly $40 a hide because fur's not quite as popular. And I haven't picked up a coon for years. So we learned to live off the land and do all the extra things that would bring us money. Everyone around us lived like us. When I was young, I mowed yards for extra money. And I did this all the way until I graduated from high school. My parents always talked to us about saving money. Since I lived in the country, it was hard to get a job, but there was a little town about 7 miles away called Sabina, and there was a company that was hiring. As soon as you were 13, you could get a real job. It was called DeKalb. Anyway, I rode my bike 7 miles back and forth in the morning. It was dark. And nowadays, your parents would not let you do that. I don't think it'd be safe, actually. But back then, we didn't think anything about it. But a bus would pick us up in town, and they would take us out to the fields. So I would detassel corn. I did it for 3 summers. And anyway, I'm not sure if you know what that means, but you walk through fields of corn, and you pull out the immature tassels, and that creates a hybrid corn, which turns into a better seed corn. Anyway, after the second year doing that, I got promoted to the road crew, which was a big deal. So if you were on the road crew, you got a shovel. Instead of detasseling, you walk through the fields and you would look for smut at the bottom of the corn. And smut is a bag of worms and like a spider web, and you would kill it so it wouldn't infect the corn. It was a great job. I was lucky to have it. I made $1.60 an hour in 1972. We were paid time and a half on the weekends, and I worked as much as I could. It was at this time in my life that I decided I was going to do whatever I could do to change my future. I was going to work hard and try to move up so I could have a better life. When I received my first paycheck, I spent a portion of it on food. I felt like we were always hungry. I bought dessert, I bought ice cream, I bought cakes, I bought cookies, because before my mom would buy half a gallon of ice cream for 5 of us to split, but I bought as much ice cream as we could get in the freezer and we could eat as much as we wanted. And I kept doing that. Every time I got a check, I bought food, the rest went into my savings account. At age 16, I applied for a full-time year-round job in the closest town, which was 16 miles away, and that was Wilmington, Ohio. I'd purchased an old junker car by then. I had applied at 3 restaurant jobs. By the time I got home, all 3 had called me back. And I accepted the first job that I got, and that was at Duff's Smorgasbord. I was in charge of the salad bar. And once again, I was making minimum wage, but I felt great. At age 16, my neighbor died. It was a little bit down from our house, but I bought his house free and clear with my savings at age 16. I just wanted his land. I didn't really want his house. I had another plan. I tore down his house. After school, friends from around the area would come and help me. It seemed like a fun thing to do, tear stuff down, cut it up, burn it is good. At first, I had lots of help. And then as the project went on, I pretty much had no help. And when I didn't work, my dad would come help me, and we got through this. When I was at the end of the project, there was one shed left at the end of the property, and nobody was around. I thought, okay, I'm just going to set this on fire and get it over with and be done with it. Well, that wasn't a very good decision. That was a really bad decision. The old wood went up so fast, and I caught a 50-acre farm, a field on fire, and it was during harvest, so it was dried up, so it didn't lose any crops. But then I also caught the neighbor's chicken house on fire and some chickens. So that was a very bad decision. I never got in trouble with the law for that. They never fined me. I'm not sure how that went away, but it was good. After the land was cleaned up, I then bought a double wide after improving the property, putting in a leaching field and septic tank for indoor plumbing, which the house before didn't have. I was in business with my double wide at age 16. My bank account started growing again. I had my job still. I had income from my rental property, and I felt really rich. I always had good grades at school. I graduated 11th in my class. There were 145 people, so I was in the top 10%, and I felt good about that. I never considered going to college. At the time, it wasn't a thing we thought about out in the country. We didn't even talk about it. Some of the kids in the city would go to college, but out in the country, none of us did. It's different now. When I graduated high school, I became the general manager at Duff's, the job I started at 16. I was making $40,000 a year, and I was making more than anybody I knew. I worked salary. I worked nonstop, but I was on salary, so it was a lot of hours. I stayed with the company and grew from 6 units to 250. I moved up to a regional director and ran a training school in Dayton, Ohio. I had a group of trainees that would travel with me all over the United States and open stores. And if we had one that was in financial trouble, we went in, changed management, and started again. I was making good money, but I was working a lot of hours, so I'm not sure if it was really a great job or not. Early in '93, Duff sold to a group called Kelly Johnson Enterprises and had a bunch of high class, fast moving guys that came in and they were going to set the world on fire. Well, they bankrupted it within 6 months. At that time, I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and every day I would get this call from a guy in Utah. He kept bugging me. I felt really weird about it. He wanted me to come move to Utah to work for him. And I'm like, I don't even know you. But the company had folded, so I had some decisions to make. But at the same time, I saw on TV where there was this place that this had terrible flooding. It was 1983. And they showed State Street on the news, and they had bags and water going down there, people fishing and being silly. And I thought, God, I would hate to be there. And about 2 weeks later, I moved to Salt Lake City. The guy turned out to be John Prance, who is a local restaurateur, with him and his partner, Fred Healy. They were stuck because the company had gone broke, and they had a franchise and they needed to open stores. So I stayed there for 16 years. I was lured away by Garcia's Mexican restaurant. I had some friends that worked there, and they told me, oh, it's fine dining, you know, good money. So I went there to work. I stayed for 2 years, and I did learn a lot about it. It was actually Chi-Chi's, and I was hired by Chi-Chi's. By this time, though, it sold to Garcia's, so it ended up working at Garcia's. So I learned a lot about that, but only stayed 2 years. One thing I did learn is restaurant business is one of the hardest jobs that you can ever have. I'm sure a lot of you worked in restaurant business, but those are people you need to respect, because physically that is a hard job. And when I go to restaurants now, which I go out a lot, I'm kind to all the staff. I have friends that are bussers, dishwashers, managers, owners. I talk to everybody and I treat them kindly because it's a hard job, you know? Anyway, after that, my next adventure was going to work at Cisco. This is the food distributor and not the software company. And we have 2 gals from Cisco today, so thank you for coming. I had friends working there, and they seemed to be making good money and enjoying their jobs. They didn't work all weekend, and they didn't work nights. I started at the bottom in sales. It was a job that you work to become fully commissioned. I was just excited to be in charge of me for a change. Cisco provided me with an opportunity to turn this into a good career. They gave us constant training and support to grow and be knowledgeable to benefit ourselves and our customers. Each individual salesperson could create whatever they wanted to. I loved my job. At the time, we had a contest all the time going on who could sell the most knives, produce, baking sheets, and each week it was a different category. I won everything. I won trips, I won money, I won cruises, furniture, trophies, and the respect of others. But some of the guys, because as as an employee, there weren't a lot of sales girls. You had a lot of guys, and they were all doing okay, but they didn't really, I don't know if they like me or not, but they called me the golden child because I beat them at everything. So I kept that name for a long time. One day, Cisco asked me to be a district sales manager. And remember, I took this job because I only wanted to be in charge of myself. But I ended up going to work and managing a group of 15. And as a district manager, I wanted to do a great job. And that's exactly what we did. As a team, we won it all. I got a group of individual people that wanted to work hard, be successful, and grow. And so they did that. I got married somewhere in this. About this time, my husband owned a framing company. And this wasn't Jerry Sloan. This was the husband before that one. So I've done all that. I got married and my husband owned a framing company, and then he became a general contractor. And so I also wanted to push him on that. So soon after that, he started a construction company where he built high-end custom homes. He really did all the work, but I made sure I would check on his stuff and his projects and his staff all the time to keep him on track. And this was back in the day when you could get a lot of skilled people work for you and took pride. It was really nice. I had a baby about 2.5 years later at age 36, and I was working 60 hours a week plus. And when you're at home, you had to plan, which really wasn't a big deal. I know some people sometimes has a baby and it's hard for them to take care of the baby and the job, but it all seemed okay to me. Then it happened again. Cisco needed a new regional manager, which required a lot of travel. And once again, I couldn't help myself, and I said yes. This involved guiding district managers and their teams and a lot more customers. I spent more time working with managers, and I worked to keep them excited and motivated and making money. It was like getting to work with your best friends every day. Everyone had a job to do, and it was great if they respected you and liked you, but it wasn't a personality contest. We had goals to achieve and budgets to hit. Most people enjoyed the job and they could make a good living. Those that didn't decided to go away and do something else they like. A fully commissioned job isn't for everyone. Somewhere in the middle of this, I got divorced. Anyway, my ex-husband was really good with our son. Since I traveled a lot, he could take care of him while he worked the construction company, so it all worked out. Neither one was alimony. We both make good money, and we worked on taking care of raising Rhett. My son, Rhett, learned about business when he was young because both of us were running companies. The regional manager job was a bigger challenge, so the more hours had to be put in each day. I did this position 3 years. The golden child was moving up. After 3 years of this, I was promoted to vice president of sales. I made great money. I was offered stock options and was on the executive staff participating in the decision-making for the entire company. At that time, Cisco Intermountain had about 565 employees. Since then, they have moved a lot to corporate in Houston, but it was a lot of people. I know it sounds like it's bragging, but we were the #1 sales team in Cisco all over the United States for several years in a row. Corporate sent people from all over to come train at the company. We were on fire. Each level of the company involved more work and more responsibility, but I honestly loved my job. Our territory was Utah, Idaho, Nevada, Wyoming, and the western slopes of Colorado. We had about 3,000 customers. Each one of them had your direct phone line and your cell phone number. So this required having a very good team in the company to take care of everything. Otherwise, you were going to get phone calls saying the truck was late, one of your people didn't do their job, or they found a worm in their produce. It's any position. There's good and there's bad. It was key to stay ahead of it and solve problems and take care of business, making sure the customers had the product they wanted and that it was delivered on time. Our sales team built solid relationships with customers, and the customers needed to know they could depend on them. I still call many of these people my friends today. Leadership is not about being the boss. It's about developing your team and caring for those in your charge. In 2005, I met Jerry Sloan. His wife had died of cancer in 2004. And I used to watch a lot of news. I still watch the news like crazy. He always looked so sad and grumpy in the press conferences. He's on TV, and I thought, what a grouch. He looks terrible. Anyway, I told my friends that I wanted to meet him because I could cheer him up. I was just kind of being funny. We also had a suite at the Jazz. Cisco did at the time because it was a big account, but I never paid attention to the game. I was really excited about our customers and making sure they were taken care of. And I didn't think I would meet Jerry. But one night, some friends of mine were out at a club and Jerry was there. So they told him about me and he said, oh, call her and tell her to come meet us. That was July 2005. They called me and it was 10 p.m. and I was in bed watching the news. They convinced me to get up and get dressed to go meet him. I didn't think I was going to, but I thought, gosh, this is my opportunity. So I got up and it was really funny. I didn't really think anything was going to happen. So I didn't put on any makeup. And I remember put on jeans and a white shirt and I looked very plain. And Jerry was really funny because he was with some other Jazz coaches and staff and they'd been drinking. They had been to the grand opening of Cabela's. And I had actually also worked Cabela's that day at Cisco because when we had a big account open like that, we'd go in and work with them and help them get organized. So we were both there, but I didn't see him there. I gave him my number, thought I'll never hear from this guy again. He called me the next day and we went to get drinks. I decided that he was great, handsome, and funny. I was 17 years younger than Jerry. But I felt like I needed to work much harder to get in shape and try to look better. He was very physically fit, but this was his job. Those guys work out all the time. We saw each other over the summer, but he spent most of his time at his farm in Illinois. We did pass at the airport one time. He was headed out of town and I was headed in town. It didn't seem like it was going to work out at all. In September, he came back to Utah and we started dating a little bit more. Jerry was 63, I was 46. I had a 9-year-old son. Jerry told me, I don't think this is going to work because you have a young son. And he goes, I don't want to be going to parent-teacher conferences and stuff like that. And I said, well, that's great, but you aren't ever going to be invited to a parent-teacher conference or stuff like that because it's about my son, Rhett. Jerry, if you win, everybody'd be fondling over you and Rhett would be ignored. So that's never going to happen. That seemed to click with Jerry. And he kept calling me and we went out as often as time would allow with our schedules. It was a super fun time. Jerry always included my son. When we went to places, he would always let him pick out if we were going to go to dinner. Jerry drove a van at the time and I've always liked good, fast cars. And my son, who was 9, said, we are not van people. But we did go out in the van. When we got engaged, Jerry brought over a ring and he said, I guess we should get married. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. That's good. And then he let my son pick out the restaurant we were going to eat at that night. And he wanted to go to Chili's. I'm like, okay. We got married in September 12th, 2007. We both kept our busy schedules and lived between 2 houses. It was a hectic schedule. Jerry was working at the head coach of the Utah Jazz, and I was vice president of sales at Cisco and had to keep Rhett on track with his sports and his grades. And also at the time, just to let you know, I don't know, as parents, I had a friend recently say, oh, my kids are doing so terrible at school and she doesn't work or anything. And I'm like, do you check their grades? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, when Rhett was little, they had something called Skyward and you could look every day at their grades and see what homework was turned in, wasn't turned in. It's really nice to let your kids know how important that is to keep them on track and show them you care. Being the wife and the head coach is like having another full-time job. So I was still working at vice president of sales at Cisco a lot. And this job, the game started at 7 and he wanted me there at 7. I mean, I'd fly in the door at like 5 seconds till 7. It's very exciting to be part of the Jazz, and Laura also works part-time at the Jazz, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of friends that you meet because people are all involved in the Jazz. You know, people like to talk sports. So Jerry attended a few of our food shows with Cisco and a few award trips with our employees. So he got to meet a different crowd of people. And it was kind of interesting because all of my sales team, we were all so into ourselves. And, you know, he's used to people fondling over him, and it wasn't, you know, it's the same thing. We're very dedicated. We're very proud of our jobs and confident, but it was nice for him to experience something a little bit different. We all wanted to win and be the best. In 2008, Jerry said one of us should retire because we both worked many hours and life was hectic trying to make everything fit. And then we decided I would retire because I made good money, but Jerry made much better money in basketball than food service. And I stayed in I stayed in touch with the Cisco people. It was hard for me to leave because I absolutely love my job, love the customers and the people, but it was time for me to be a better mom and all the work that came along with Jerry. My life, I don't mean that in a bad way, but Jerry owned a 3,000 acre farm in Illinois and people to deal with. I don't know how he did it all, actually. And being around the basketball people, it's hard to imagine a life where you're surrounded by people making millions of dollars to provide entertainment by playing basketball. I made many friends at the arena, from ushers to ball players to wives to people that I met back in the 100 Club and Lexus Club. I had a great time back there. As I retired from Cisco, I joined the board of cystic fibrosis for several years and took over an event called the Taste of Utah. I had been a sponsor of the event, which started over 25 years ago by Summer Love and her family. I was able to take the event to a new level because I had all the contacts. I had the food service people, the managers or owners that were friends that helped us take this to a new level. And it's at Grand America every year in November. It's one of the nicest events, fundraising events in town. On that board, I met new people, doctors, lawyers, a lot of different people than I wasn't around before. And it was really fun to get to know them. And you know, they all put a lot into this in their spare time. It's not a paid position, but it was good to get to know them. In February 2011, Jerry decided to walk away from basketball. Some of the new younger players with huge egos wanted to run the team and had little respect for coaching staff or other players. I guess when you make that much money, it's probably hard to stay in control because your ego gets so big and you're really cool and everybody wants your picture and an autograph. So he decided he was just going to go away because he was getting old enough and he was too old for that. So Jerry owned a farm and he used to spend all of his time working at the farm. He had a corn, wheat, soybean farm that's still there today. We had a large farmer work it for us that would harvest all the corn, plant it, whatever, but we would travel back and forth. But at that time, Rhett was still in school, so I spent most of my time here and summers at the farm. Life really was good and everyone was happy. On January 2nd, 2014, Jerry fell on ice and broke his elbow. This is weird because we were headed to a game. We were meeting customers after he had retired and customers' friends. And we stopped at Little America to have drinks beforehand. And normally I valet there, but there was a little gingerbread house right there and there was nobody parked there. And I took that space, which turned out to be a terrible thing to do because it was raining when we went in. When we came out, it turned to ice and he had fallen. So on January 2nd, when he fell, January 5th, he had surgery after the swelling went down on his arm. He never complained much. He'd had many broken bones over the years, but he was used to it. After surgery, Jerry struggled to recover from the anesthesia. He was out of his head completely for a few days, acting crazy and violent. This wasn't in his character at all. He was hitting walls and pacing up and down in the house for nonstop for days. After about a week or so, he finally seemed to get a little bit back on track, but something was off. I couldn't figure out what was happening. He was always staring ahead with glassy eyes, not blinking, and his mouth kind of hanging open. He wasn't present in what was happening around him. He was more in a daze and his physical appearance started to change. And this is just in a snap of one surgery. He didn't come out of it. And I didn't know this at the time, but it was later explained to me, if you have tendency of Lewy body or Parkinson's in your system and you have a surgery and you go into anesthesia, it just brings it out solid. So it took me a year to figure out that Jerry needed a specific doctor. I had taken him to Indianapolis to watch a ball game and his son is a doctor. Brian's a doctor. And I asked him, do you see anything going on with Jerry? He goes, yes, when you get back to Utah, get him to a neurologist and get some cognitive tests immediately. But getting an appointment is tough. Even after you get referred by a general doctor, it took a 6-month wait. We met with Dr. Foster up at the University of Utah, right down the road here. He was very kind, helpful, and a calming man. As soon as we checked in, he had Jerry walking up and down the aisle. They checked his gait. And he said to Jerry, as soon as Jerry walked, he goes, I can pretty much tell you now before we run any tests that you have Parkinson's with Lewy body dementia. I'm like, whoa. Anyway, Jerry did the test and it was rough. So much was gone from his mind. He couldn't even draw a clock and there was one hanging on the wall. He could have cheated, but he didn't even know to look at the clock. After we came home from the appointment, everything made sense to me. And I just wish I'd known a little bit sooner what that was. I Googled the symptoms and Jerry had every one of them. There were like 10 symptoms. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. He was scared, but it helped me know more what to do and research to help care for Jerry. In 2018, I joined the Ron McBride Foundation as a board member. This is a small local charity. And Ron McBride used to be the coach of the Ute. I don't know if you guys know him, but he is like 81 years old now. This guy gets up every day and works to raise money for after school programs for children. He's actually amazing. I don't know how he does it, but volunteered for him. When I would go, I had to hire someone to come to my house for a couple hours so I could go to a board meeting to watch Jerry. In January 2014 to 2020, it became a real challenge for me in my life. I was now full-time caretaker of Jerry. Full-time caretaking is something that requires 24 hours a day when a person has dementia. You can't leave them alone. And sometimes I hear people, they're like, oh, my mom has dementia, I'm taking care of her. And I'm like, you're taking care of her? And they're like, yeah, well, she doesn't really live with me. She lives with my dad. But the dad is the caretaker. Some people really get confused who the caretaker is. Just stopping by to see somebody, you're not the caretaker, because caretaker is a really, really difficult thing. Jerry did his best to stay physically fit. They had him on a Mediterranean diet. He would walk 4 miles a day. He couldn't drive anymore, but he had good friends. I could take him to lunch to meet, or I'd take him to ball games. As much as I could get him out, you're supposed to keep him socially active. Each month rolled into years. And I always thought we were at the end. I always thought, okay, this is the end of this. I was as worn out as Jerry, because when a person has Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia, they don't really sleep. They just pace all the time. In May of 2019, I had to move Jerry to a memory care facility because I couldn't help him anymore. It physically required around-the-clock supervision. At the facility, they had staff all day and all night, because after Jerry checked in there, he started walking 10 miles a day. He thought he had to get back into shape to get to work. I would go in twice a day to spend with him. And if he was doing good, I'd bring him home. I'd pick him up, take him home so he could have a little bit of normal life. A couple times I'd take him back. I'd always get him a milkshake. He always liked that. And take him back to check him in. I pull up and I go, okay, Jerry, we got to go back in now. And he's like, no, you go in. I'm going to wait out here. And I'm like, okay, no, Jerry, we can't do that. And the only way I got him to go back in, I'd say, well, they got your pills in there, because he was always big into taking his vitamins and prescriptions. So that's how to get him back in there. When they have a hard time at the facility, if Jerry was anxious, they always call the person that they're closest to. So they could call me any time of the night and go in and help Jared. When COVID came along, and they only let me in the care facility as if a crisis would happen, because Jerry fell a couple times, I had to get him out, take him to the hospital and stuff. They would call me. But when COVID started, this was March 2020, they locked people out. And on March 11th, they let me know they were locking us out. So I don't know, I think this is one of the worst things that ever happened, because if you had a person in a care facility and they were losing their minds, it only made them crazier. And I think it was kind of torture, in my opinion. But one day they're like, oh, he's really upset. Can you come look through the window at him? I'm like, yeah, okay. So I go and I'm standing there looking through the window, and his eyes were so big and he was freaked out and all glossied over. And I just said, we're going home now. Get his stuff. You know, he had a whole room there and stuff, but get his personal belongings, load him in the truck. I'm taking him home. I knew it was at the end, and I could have enough energy to get through a little more time, because I couldn't stand him being scared and tortured. I moved a hospital bed into my room with him, and I had sideboards on it, so he couldn't get out unless I let him out. And I know that sounds mean, but they won't stop walking. After a while, hospice finally came in and would help me get him showered and check his vitals. They didn't really do much else. I don't know why, if it was because of COVID, but it was kind of still on the caretaker. About 5 days before Jerry died, his oxygen was getting low, and they kind of targeted that right to the day that they're going to pass away. So I called his kids and told them they needed to get there. Jerry died on May 22nd, 2020. It's now 2.5 years later, and I'm wondering what my next chapter will be in life. I finished my time with the Ron McBride Foundation after co-chairing the year-end gala recently. It's time for new talent there. I also am retired from cystic fibrosis, folks, until I get that pitch in that they may need just next year for the Taste of Utah. My son, Rhett Jessup, graduated from University of Utah and started his own insurance company 4 years ago called Tailored Insurance Group. He came to school at University of Utah. He did an internship. And then one day he told Jerry and I'm going to quit my job and start my own company. And we're both, what? Don't do that. Anyway, he did. And it's amazing what he's done. He makes more money than I ever did in an executive position. He's doing quite well and is living a good life. I'm now free to be whatever I want to be. Life is not about how much money you have, how popular you are, or being highly educated or being perfect. Life is about being real, humble, and kind to all. Just be yourself. Thanks once again for letting me be here today. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a terrific 2023. Thank you.
Tammy's excited to take questions from everybody.
Very excited.
Who wants to go first?
Back there.
All right.
You can ask me anything too. I really don't care.
Yeah, you don't seem shy at all.
I'd probably tell the truth or I might make something up.
What was the small town in Ohio that you grew up in?
Okay, close to Wilmington, Ohio, but it was Clinton County. It really wasn't a town. Clinton County, the most fertile ground in the United States.
So my family's from Ohio, so I'm going to say to you, OH.
Ohio.
All right.
Ohio State, girl.
Yep, that's all I have.
They say we can't spell it. It takes two people, right? No questions. You're making it way too easy on me.
Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much. It's energizing to hear your story. Where would you like to focus your energies in the next coming years? I have some thoughts, but
Oh,
want to
goodness.
see if they align.
One thing I thought, so after just finishing the gala for Ron McBride and trying to help Ashley get tables and sponsors for the Taste of Utah this year, which was really hard to do because the people didn't want to participate because they don't have enough workers in their restaurants. I thought, gosh, maybe I need to break. I love to hike, but the problem is when people ask me to do something, will you help us with this? I'm always like, yes, it just spills out of me. So I'm hoping I won't do much, honestly. I'm hoping I just do a little traveling and have some fun. Thank you. And you paid more attention than anybody in the room, so thank you. Any questions?
I think we all want to know who the basketball player was that has all the ego. What does it rhyme with?
Well, actually at the time it was Darren Williams, and we're to say, and I don't want to put any hate on Darren Williams at all, because the thing is, I've done some things in my life that are just terrible, and I could write them down on paper and I regret them when I think of them. And I think Darren got to that position because Darren at the time was very, very talented. But he wasn't really good with the team and the coaches, and you get full of yourself. But since then, Darren went on to a couple teams and it didn't really work out for him. He went to Brooklyn and he didn't show up. Went to Dallas, they cut him. They went to Cleveland. You got three teams that paid you to go away. Since then, Darren's been to my house before Jerry passed away because Darren felt horrible about what happened. And I wish him only the best, because he came, apologized to Jerry and said, I know I was immature. I did this and this. And Jerry said to him, when he was with Greg Miller and Steve Starks at the time, who was president. And Jerry kept saying to him, because Jerry at this time had Parkinson's and dementia. We were at a round table at the house, and Jerry kept saying, you suck. And 7 times Jerry said, you suck. And I'm like, okay, enough now, Jerry. And then I felt really bad for Darren. I'm like, oh my God, I got to run interference. But Greg, Steve, and I went outside the house. Those two made peace. And then when Jerry died, Darren was one of the first people to call me. And I swear he made me cry. I don't cry a lot because things happen. But when Darren called me, I cried because he apologized again. I said, Darren, I want you to go on with your life. You're okay. Jerry totally forgave you. You're fine. Go do your life. So anyway, when you see him, be nice to him because he lives in Utah.
I run into Darren all the time. So.
He's at a lot of jazz games. He had his hair dyed blonde the last time I saw him. Anybody else? Oh. You know, people used to ask Jerry to write a book all the time, and he wouldn't because he said he had a lot of good in his life, but there's a lot of things on the backside that he would expose about himself and that he didn't ever want to write a book. And I don't have those bad things in my life. No, but I don't think it would sell to anybody. My little story is interesting to me, but that's about it. So I don't think anybody would buy it. Yay! Yep, no, thanks. Anything else? Okay, Merry Christmas. Thank you.